If you play any video game, what do you think of when you hear the word top tier? Do you think broken, maybe? Maybe like OP? Maybe something that wins all the time? You probably think all of these things, right? But in Guilty Gear Strive, there's a character that many high-level players in the West, myself included, think is routinely a top tier character. But this character has one kind of small problem. And that problem is she barely actually wins anything. So in order to figure this out, we need to look at this character's strengths and weaknesses so we can kind of determine not just where she is in the meta compared to other characters, but why specifically she might not perform so well in competitive play. So today we're going to talk about the strongest character that never wins, asterisk, Ramlethal Valentine. So first we gotta look at what type of character Ramlethal is before actually discussing her strengths and weaknesses. So Ramlethal is a mid-range style character. One of her standout things is that she has really large attacks. She's made to control the mid-range and then try to push people in the corner where she pushes her advantage. Might sound like a lot of characters in this game when you step back and look at it, but different characters have unique ways of approaching this, and Ramlethal's is very straightforward in that she's really just swinging on normals and mid-range. So first let's look at the character's strengths. For starters, she has an extremely fast dash. And note how I'm saying dash here. Actually, in a previous patch, they have nerfed Ramlethal's run speed. She used to be incredibly fast, but now she still maintains her dash speed, but not her run speed. It's kind of been a joke among top players that Elfelt stole Ramlethal's speed. Then next is her great mid-range. I did mention she was a mid-range control character, but I cannot stress how actually good she is at this. Now, there are characters who can outrange her. So for example, Baiken technically outranges Ramlethal. So here we have Ramlethal using her 5H. Now, I can make this whiff, and in this range, my H Kabari will actually go and reach Ramlethal. The problem for Baiken here is that usually when this type of interaction happens, while this move is really good from Baiken, it's not fast. Point blank, it's 18 frames, meaning it's not fast. And as a quick example, this has a gap because the close slash has 16 frames of block stun, and then the H Kabari has 18 frames startup. Basically, the main point is that this move is not fast despite it controlling a lot of space. So the thing that makes Ramlethal really stand out is that she has a tool like this that's comparable range that is 12 frames. So it's incredibly fast. So this is not just good for fighting characters like Baiken, but it's also good at fighting against characters who have long range buttons that are disadvantaged, but they use the space to try to take advantage of the situation, like Axel. So here I'm gonna have Axel doing 2H and Ramlethal countering, and I'm getting actually punished here. So most characters would not even be able to attempt a punish on Axel here. Or another example would be to swing on far slash after doing ID back JS, which is pretty common with Axel. Once he uses this move, he's able to cycle a lot of movement options that are kind of tricky for people to deal with unless they're fast or their name is Ramlethal Valentine. And furthermore, she's able to stop defensive characters and zoners from setting up the things they want to set up for a really long range, again because her attacks are really large, such as Faust doing the item throw. So when I say she's really good at mid-range, it's really because of this combination of her fast dash speed and then also having really big buttons for mid-screen to prevent characters from doing what they want to do and having to change their neutral game plan to revolve around her rather than the other way around. Ramlethal also has some of the best jumping buttons in the game. So one of these perspectives is from combo conversion ability. So some characters just kind of struggle converting air hits to full combos, where Ramlethal has no problem. So one, even if you don't know what to do, her J2 and 4S hard knocks down. So you just simply get a hard knockdown from this. But with more practice, you can convert situations like this into full combos if you have the ability to recognize where you are on the screen. This is pretty valuable in the game and not that common. For comparison's sake, Baiken does have the ability to convert the same way, but it's much more difficult for her to do so. So for example, a typical Baiken air confirm would look like this. And with a little bit more skill, you can try to convert maybe like this, but it's pretty difficult to do in the moment. Any further adjustments, because there definitely are stuff you could do, are things that are pretty uncommon. Being able to set up the type of combo you want with JP is extremely valuable. On top of that, her JP is just huge. and it being mashable makes it really easy to bring people down from the air to the ground. And then you have her JK. So her JK hits like really deep for a jumping kick, and it combos into her J214S, so both of these are really valuable. On top of that, since her JK hits at such a nice angle, she's also really good at baiting anti-airs because she doesn't necessarily have to commit. Then finally, we have to talk about JS. This move is frankly really ridiculous. It is somewhat common for characters to have at least one disjointed air normal, and it being on JS is really crazy. Basically, if you don't have a fast character, you really will have problems against this move, and it just hits things from really far away. And if you're a solo character, it's like you have to run so far that you're not actually going to be able to reach and do something about them doing this move. It's actually a really difficult move to deal with. So you're combining this with her best-in-class mid-range options as well. The next point about Ramlethal is her improved conversion ability. So she was really strong when the game came out as well, but one of her main weaknesses was she wasn't really good at kick confirming in mid-screen. Her options for converting hits into combos at range without using resource are actually quite limited. You either straight up go into 5H and just reset to neutral, you could use Dodwell, you could RC, that depends on space. If you get a counter hit, you can get good reward, but on normal hits, she doesn't actually really get much. But in Season 3, they introduced Wild Assault, so they didn't just give her a new special move, but they gave her a new mechanic as well. And since she has the red Wild Assault, she's able to convert hits into full combos she wasn't able to do before, and she could do this at the beginning of the round. So before, and there's some characters you might think of this too, like Baiken is one of them, where at the beginning of the round, you might not be too scared of her unless she gets a throw in early or a big hit in early. But once Baiken gets meter, you're like, oh snap, I'm really scared of what's about to happen. Where Ramlethal, it used to be kind of that way. Like the way you would think about Ramlethal would be, oh, if she gets me in the corner, I'm in trouble. But with the addition of Wild Assault, now, as long as she has Burst, she has way better conversion ability. It is lessened in this patch compared to before because of the burst not taking away as much burst meter, so you can burst quickly. But that does not change the fact that on normal hit from round start, she can basically convert into her best situation or one of her best situations. Her damage is also quite high for this game. So she was one of the poster children for the damage in Guilty Gear Strive is too high, and she still has this available. She has very high damage supers and combos. This is of course an idealized situation where I have a lot of meter, but it's just to show that you can combo into a big damage super, and she has ways to extend the combo to add additional damage for the wall breaks, all quite valuable. Not to mention, she does have the ability to do this from mid-screen. Another great strength of hers is how good she is at doing block string pressure in the corner. Basically, every time she touches you with a button in the corner, there is a variety of options she can do and a variety of responses, and everything she does, if she hits you, will kill you, and if not, your risk gauge will just go up. The ability to be able to put on offense and not have to worry too much about like a definite endpoint where the opponent can retaliate is extremely valuable in this game, and a lot of the strongest characters in the game have pressure sequences like this, where either you can do something but you have to be brave enough to do it in the first place, or there might not be that much counterplay depending on your character at all. A nice way to put it is that at best for the opponent, they have to make a choice, and at worst, it is like nigh inescapable. As a side note, the developers have been trying to do stuff to make it easier for people to get out of situations like this. The most obvious ones being stuff like the Flex Shield, and things like burst, taking all your risk away and things like that, but she still has this aspect of strong looping pressure. Another really strong aspect of her is her top class anti-airs. So she has both 5p and 6p. So her 6p, the main strength of this move is that she goes really low to the ground, so you basically have to clear her in order for this to not work, which is pretty difficult. And her 5p is just pretty fast and it just hits high, so it's really difficult to jump in on this character. And then last but not least are her K buttons. So she has some of the best kicks in the entire game. So the main factors here are the reach, the hitbox, and how fast her initial dash is. I try to make Ramlethal dash to reasonably the same spot, and when I use 2K, she just kind of pulls up to the right spot, right? But when I use 5K, I just get hit, or whipped, or punished. You just cannot hit her back leg here. And a lot of characters in this game really like to use 2K. Characters like Milia and Chip and Bridget have really strong 2Ks. So being able to use her 5K especially really well makes it extremely extremely difficult to deal with, especially when you're standing around like this range. And the other really strong things about her kick comes from her 2K. The big thing is that she's able to delay her 2D. This is not that common in the game. You usually see characters like Kai doing this, but Ramlethal can do this as well. If you're wondering what's so good about this, is that the sweep is a heavy counter hit and it has more block stun than normal. And if you're mixing up this and this, you can catch people trying to delay mash on your second kick, which lets you dash it and reset pressure, which is pretty scary. So next we are going to talk about her weaknesses. So first off, she has lower reward on some frame traps compared to what she used to, not just from the overall damage being lower in the game. I think it might sound funny to you, but the damage is lower overall compared to when the game came out, but also because of a major change they made to Rekkas. So it's a pretty universal change, but when you get counter hit by a Rekka style move, so a special move that goes into a special move, you don't get a big counter hit message anymore, you get a small counter hit. Baiken actually got affected by this as well, as did Chip. Now this affects Ramlethal a lot because one of her strengths as a character was having all these individual points where if you were incorrect, then Ramlethal would deal a lot of damage. So actually, when Ramlethal doesn't have a lot of meter, her Rekkas are not that scary, and they used to be a huge part of her offensive game. In the old style counter hit, this would be scary because it would give the old style into like a big combo, and it would enable Ramlethal to do things like this legitimately and have it be very scary. Now she can still do these things, but with less return, so she has to rely more on normals and her new special move. Another weakness of hers comes from what her fastest button is. So for most characters, their fastest buttons usually are buttons like 2K, rarely, or 2Ps. But hers is a 5P, which, not gonna lie, it's not the rarest things in the world. So like Baiken and Chip both have the fastest buttons as 5P. Baiken's 5P being 4 frames, and Chip's being 3, which is like the fastest button in the game, along with Soul Bad Guy's 5K. But Ramlethal uniquely has a kind of useless 5 frame. So while it does hit crouching point blank, it's kind of hard to use against people who are crouching. And it's really valuable to have your fastest move be a crouching move. So I have Ramlethal here doing a pretty simple throw setup where she'll do close slash and throw. Then she'll do close slash OTG into the first hit of the Rekka and throw immediately after. If I 5B here, this is Ramlethal's fastest button, so I get out no problem. But if I use 2P, what do you think will happen? If you answered, you're going to get thrown. Congratulations, you're correct. And what will happen if I use 2K? If you answered again, I will get throw punish. Congratulations, you are correct. So having a fast normal that's easily accessible is very important for these type of situations, and Ramlethal's being on 5P and having it be this small and things is definitely not that great. As an extension of this, her defense without meter is technically kind of subpar. Since her fastest button is this 5P, she has a pretty standard toolkit of just like a normal backdash, a normal jump, and her 5P. And if you don't go into 6P right away, you will get nothing. So if you do this, you have to commit into 6P into Rekka, and you don't even get like a full combo here. You just go into this restand situation, which is just like standard advantage for the character and not something like a knockdown that other characters would get. When she does have meter, she does have a top class super in Motobato, aka Motorboat as we lovingly call it, that can't be backdashed by pretty much anybody besides 6 frame invul characters. But before she has meter, she is really struggling on defense, and it's kind of rough to have that in a game that's so focused on offense. I mentioned this earlier in the video, but her classic weakness is that she's not so great at converting without resource, and they did give her red wild assault, which made her crazy in 3.0 and is still really good now. But compared to other characters, she is actually one of the rare characters in the game that either doesn't convert well or doesn't get that much reward outside the corner. So like I mentioned before, you're going to be converting into Daro quite a bit, and on 5H this usually does not work, and this, even like the flip kick, does not really work. This is not supposed to be a combo. It really only works on crouching normal hit here and not standing hit. So if you're not using something like wild assault or using resource, you're not really converting all your hits unless they're airborne or counter hits, or you have wild assault or meter available. Once you get closest to the corner though, it becomes much easier to convert. And they did give her a change that does help with corner push a little bit, but still overall she does have her gaps in conversions where some other strong characters would not. Then her big other issue is actually a pretty classic one in this game, of her sweep not reaching off kicks consistently. This is a big deal for pretty obvious reasons. If you space her really good top tier kicks well, then you can't normally follow up. If she had a buffed range on her sweep, she is one of the rare characters that have sweep into wild assault, so it would actually be ridiculous for her if she had this option. But since the game came out, she's had this problem, so I'm pretty sure she's meant to just not be able to convert this very well, especially because her kicks are so strong. And then last but not least, we talk about how easy it is for fast characters to whip punish her. So she has these big disjointed normals that are just really hard for people to deal with, but they're extremely whip punishable. For reference, you guys can't see this, but I'm actually not in game. Like, you see the game, but I'm using OBS to record myself whip punishing this move. That's how easy it is to whip punish with Geo against Ramlethal if she uses her heavy buttons. That move is huge, but she's stuck out there for a really long time. And I even waited even longer than normal to whip punish this. This is a big deal because one of her main strengths as a character is that she has these big disjointed sword moves. So with that, we have to look at her place in the meta. So at the time of this recording, I actually posted a tier list like a couple of days ago, 3-4 days ago at this point, where I rated her as top tier basically again. So she's quite a strong character and she has a lot of valuable matchups, like not just now but in the history of the game. So for example, when Zato was better, she could be Zato. She was one of the characters that was good at handling Happy Chaos. She could whip punish Nago. And then her speed made her really good against characters like Axel, Faust, and Jacko. At the moment, she's slower than she was before, but she has better conversion ability, so I feel like she ends up working mostly the same. But there's a really common argument to make in that if you look at tier lists from other regions, specifically in Asia, they don't think Ramlethal is so strong because they play a lot of characters that have stuff that is good against the character. One thing about this game is that every character, even the best characters in the game, have at least a couple of bad matchups. Normally the best characters in the game mostly have good or even matchups, and they have a couple of bad matchups that are just not that common or you don't have to worry about it so much. Where the main thing about characters, like in my grouping, the extra effort grouping for example, is that they actually have some good matchups into a couple top tiers, but then they have other top tiers that they kind of struggle against. And specifically, if we're talking about 2.5, so like this point last year, there were a big group of characters who all had like really good stuff, and they all lost to the same characters. It was Happy Chaos, Leo, Nago, and Ramlethal. Now, Ramlethal's big weakness ends up being that she's not that good at converting her kicks, even though they're really broken. They're like honestly like some of the best kicks in the entire game. And she can be whip punished really easily on a slash or heavy buttons. So she ends up struggling against characters like Chip, Giovanna, more recently, honestly, characters like Milia, and even Leia Whitefang. So the biggest problems for her are characters that are fast, that could dash into her slash buttons, and then out risk return her on kicks because she can't convert her kicks that well. Now, if we're talking about North America though, Giovanna and Chip are actually pretty rare. And then you do have to worry about Milia in North America, but they don't commonly get that deep in the bracket. So if we reference like Frosty, for example, Rat has some pretty good results in offline tournaments. So Rat got 7th at Frosty Faustings out of more than 700 people. Myself on Milia, a lot of my results outside of the first early Evo are like either bottom half, so top 8s, getting like 5th through 7th, or just missing top 8 finals day, getting like 9th or 13th. Not counting big misses along the way every now and then, but you know how it is in Guilty Gear Bros. So then, out of those 4 characters in North America, the main one you would have to worry about is definitely Leo Whitefang. This character is pretty common in tournaments and is very heavily represented in finals. But in addition to that, Ramlethal doesn't really like characters with good defense either. So if you take this matchup, for example, like a Soul Ramlethal, maybe they do okay buttons versus buttons, but Soul outconverts her really cleanly. So if he hits 2k, he will always knock down. If he hits far slash, it'll always lead into combo. Basically, when he hits you, he just gets a combo, where the aforementioned Ramlethal could miss, where you might see this pressure sequence and think it's pretty scary. There is a bunch of gaps and you can respawn, but again, if you're wrong, you're going to die, right? But a character like Soul, since he has so many very defensive options, there's actually a bunch of spots in this string where he could choose to respawn. So characters of good defense, not counting Bike and Parry because she can't parry projectiles, are actually really valuable against her and pretty annoying for her to fight. In Japan and Korea, characters like Soul and Kai and Chip were way more popular early on in the game than here, but at this point now, characters like Kai, Soul, Leo, they're far more common than they used to be, so you see this problem come up way more now than before. Another thing is that she just dies fast. Not gonna lie, I don't know soul routing. I'm sure there's a soul in the comments that is going, you could have done this, you could have put clean hit DP here, blah blah blah. I'm not gonna say I rolled my face on the buttons, but I basically just made up something from the ether, just from memories of getting hit by this character. No actual specialties doing soul combos, and I only made her block one single close slash, and she took like a little north of 70% of her life. Should tell you that her defense is subpar. She takes a lot of damage. So the combination of her not having a good defensive modifier and having poor defensive options before she has meter definitely hurts her, and specifically hurts her in tournament because being able to do a lot of damage and high conversion ability is extremely valued by tournament players. Then compared to a lot of tournament characters, despite her maximum damage being pretty high, her conversion ability being low between the kicks problem and not being able to convert without resource off her big slashes or counter hits makes her not convert as often as some of the other top tiers in the game, who basically, if they make contact with you, they will be able to make something happen. And then finally, depending on who you talk to, at the moment, a lot of her standout matches are just not that common, or they're not being rated as highly at the moment because of patches. When this game came out in North America, a lot of people were like more specialist or playing their old main. So like, for example, Mia on Milia, and Ramlethal was really good against Milia. Probably her best matchup against Milia ever, because Milia generally beats Ramlethal in Exert. Where now Ramlethal has a bunch of good matchups, right? Like she fights Zato well, and she fights Happy Chaos well, she fights Testament well, people say she fights Jacko well, she fights Biken well, she fights Johnny well, she fights a bunch of characters well. But a lot of these characters are not the most popular character picks, and they're not commonly represented at the end of really large events. Instead, she's going to have to deal with the Leo, Nago, Soul, Kai army far more often than some of these specialist characters. So if we want to ask, why does Ramlethal not win really large events very often, despite people thinking she's really strong in her strengths? She honestly is a pretty good tournament character in that she could make things happen, really make things happen by pushing her turn and having high damage and being able to control neutral really well. The problem is she continues to run into stuff she has problems with really deep in a bracket. She still has really high value as a tournament character because she does well both for mid-range characters and zoners specifically, and having a good match against a zoner in tournament is just there's no way to put it, it's goated. Like, you need that. You really need that. You don't want to run into somebody that bursts you and then beats you, aka you hit them, they burst, they win. You really don't like that, so her being able to fight that is amazing. But since right now people are really valuing having more complete toolkits, so rather than having like super high peaks, they'd rather have a slightly lower peak but have all around be strong in every situation, and she is not that character. Also, she has higher potential to be upset compared to a lot of these characters because of her HP. There are a lot of characters right now who convert well, who have a lot of HP, they convert better than her, they can make mistakes, they can take risks, you can hit them, they'll build meter for getting hit, and she just doesn't have those opportunities. In other periods where Ramlethal has been considered pretty strong, she has been upset. A really great example is the 2023 Frosty Faustings, where Ramlethal players were dropping left and right to Anji. So even though her stats are really high, she does have clear weaknesses, and it could really come out in a tournament setting. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. So, I mean, even now, I think this character is pretty strong, and, you know, Tempest posted a tier list, I posted a tier list. we kind of think similarly, and one of the biggest questions we get from Japanese players is like, why does everyone think Ramlethal is so strong over here, where they usually rate her mid tier? And that's also why like we'll see patch notes from devs, so we're like, they'll be like, we didn't change anything about Ram, or we gave Ram some new crazy thing, and over here we're like, why would you do this? And in Japan they're like, it's still not enough. So it's pretty interesting to see the differences in between playstyles and approach to the game, and it's really why I enjoy talking about the characters specifically. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.